You are listening to the Warrior Project podcast, where mindset, tribe, and violence meet.
What's up, folks? This is Justin Garcia, also known as Master Chim, and welcome to episode 19 of the Warrior Project podcast. I got a special treat for you today. This is a live episode in that I'm interviewing longtime good friend Cady Mathews. Now, Cady is a dog trainer, a animal behaviorist. He trains in jiu-jitsu. He's an all-around very educated, very informed guy, and the perfect sort of complement to a conversation I wanted to have about the similarities between animal, specifically dog behaviors, and the behaviors that we observe in people, which also happen to be animals. So I won't ramble on too much, but it's a special treat. I'm very, very glad you guys are getting to listen to this talk. And you'll notice that obviously with the live format of the Warrior Project podcast, these are going to be much longer than the normal 20-minute or less shows. So there is a little bit more to take in. But for some of you guys have been requesting longer episodes. So the live is a good sort of way to take care of everybody, so to speak. But I will stop here. I appreciate you guys and enjoy the talk. What's up, folks? This is Justin Garcia, a.k.a. Master Chim, and this is an episode of the Warrior Project Live. This is the first guest that I've had on the Warrior Project since I started it, and it's going to be a great guest indeed. Longtime friend and dog trainer extraordinaire, my man Cady Mathews is in the house. KD, say what's up to the audience.
What's going on, everybody? What's up, MC? Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
No, absolutely. I appreciate it. And the impetus for this was really probably back in the Pressure Project days when I was dealing with so many of the topics that I tend to deal with that sort of go in and out of the topic of behavior and animal behavior and all the parallels. I'm always using the dog whisperer, analogies and examples because it's such a familiar, thing for a lot of people to connect with. But really, you were somebody. How long ago did we meet? Do you even remember?
Yeah, it was 2005.
2005. Holy shit. But long time. And you were training, I think, with Rob at that time.
Yes. At
Gracie, Tampa. And shout out to Rob Kahn. And you lived in Florida. You still live in Florida. You're not originally from Florida, right? Give somebody, this is a good segue. Give somebody some background on you and your story.
Born and raised in upstate New York, about 20 minutes south of Albany, about 2 hours north of the Bronx, depending on how fast you drive. Mm-hmm. Came down to Florida in early 2000s, right after, shortly after 9/11. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I was going to school for education. As a teacher, and I ended up staying down here, grew roots, got a job, and there's a lot of great dog training down here. My mentor lives down here, a lot of great dog people to surround myself with, and I stayed. I've been in Tampa for almost 15 years going on, thereabouts. But still a northerner. I was up for the holidays, loving the snow, until my flight got delayed. Outside of that, I missed the cold.
Right. So now, early 2000s, you're in Florida, you're going to school for education to be a teacher. You wind up being a dog trainer. How did that transition happen?
I have been involved with dogs since 1994 when I got my first dog. The story of how I got into dogs plays a very important role with the work I do with my clients, because as a child, I was terrified. Actually, petrified would probably be a better word, of dogs. I mean, would completely freeze up. And that grew, and so I grew. And at 12 years old, my father was rather embarrassed at my rather pathetic reaction to the presence of a dog. And he says, we got to do something about this. And I nerded out on dogs. I started reading everything I could. Now, this is before the internet. There was no Google. you got an encyclopedia. You went to the library.
Right.
Educated myself, not on behavior at the time, on just dog history, dog breeds. You could come up with any rare breed, and I could tell you where it came from, what its purpose was, and what its current state of affairs are. Fast forward, I get a dog my sophomore year in high school. Bad time to get a dog. Getting a driver's license, sports. I ultimately failed as a dog owner. I sucked. I am not naturally inclined in any way, shape, or form for interacting with animals. I don't have that presence. I don't have that that air about me, and some of that is genetic, and we can talk about that later. I gave away my first dog because I failed.
Right.
I gave him to a professional trainer who was a bird dog man who took me under his wing, no pun intended. And that's when it started. So I've actually been training dogs for over 25 years. Florida just happened to be when I finally got with the right people to start making money on it. But it's been an obsession for a long time.
Right. So now you had a dog that you gave to a bird dog. Was it a bird dog breed?
Oh, it was a gorgeous black Labrador. I mean, he was stunning. Amazing animal.
Right, right. So now you find out the gentleman that you gave the dog to, he wound up being your mentor in training?
He was the first. He was.
So explain that, because one of the things, and I'll just interject, one of the things, like I eventually, and I am absolutely certain of this, I will train dogs. Maybe as a hobbyist, maybe as just part of the work that I do with just behavioral work and philosophy in general, because there's just so much overlap that we'll get into. But the one thing that I am a true believer of is the mentor-apprentice model. And I would never go into this thinking that I'm going to reinvent the wheel and somehow make it rounder, right? Because it's just not the way shit works, right? Mm-hmm. So tell me your process of finding the right mentor. It sounds like you had more than one.
I've had numerous. Over 20 years, just as the journey moves, my interests move. And I've considered myself pretty lucky to have the mentors that I have had, including the one I currently have now, simply because it's just through a turn. You shake a hand here, you shake a hand there. I got lucky. But that isn't useful information for anyone. Mm-hmm. Saying that I'm lucky doesn't help anybody, because there is a process. And finding a mentor first requires that you have the right frame of mind, that you're going into whatever this skill set is that you're looking to acquire, that you are looking to better yourself in, whether it be learning behavior and dog training, whether it's working with metals and iron, or whether it's sharpening your hands and foot skills. First, have the right state of mind. I am looking to learn, which means a whole lot less of this thing moving, and you're willing to listen and shut your mouth. Mm-hmm. From there, it's putting yourself in the environments where you can hopefully start networking and meeting people, communicating, make yourself available for mentorship. Not all of mine were simply I ran into someone. It was because I was in the right place. I put myself in an environment of people that knew more than I did, which required me understanding and being humble about what I don't know. And just watching, asking questions of these people, and eventually it'll happen organically. The right person will find you, you'll find them by asking questions. Someone who is willing to guide you will make themselves known. And from there, it's just about being completely transparent, honest, humble, having some type of code, and hopefully that person matches that, and then you can progress from there.
So now you find your first mentor. Is it because there are a lot of different models under which people could learn and transfer that information from one person to the next? Are you now helping him train dogs? Are you taking private lessons? Are you corresponding in some way? How does that happen logistically?
Well, my first one, I haven't spoken to him in 10 years. He's kind of moved on. I think he's in a retirement home at this point. I've actually tried to reach out to him and have been unable to get him. He was much older. Even back then, I think he was in his 60s. Mm-hmm. we'll speak in the context of my current mentor, who also has become as such one of my best friends and my personal role models in life. He lives an hour and a half, 2 hours away, and he travels all over the country. So even when he's not there, he's all over. How does it work? It works, I mean, now with technology, between being able to access him, whether via chatting or on the phone, when I get to see him, we get to actually sit down and get some dogs in front of us or I can ask him some questions. What's interesting, though, is as I have evolved in my own proficiency at this skill set in this particular arena, so has the relationship with the mentors that I have had. So as you mentioned, I've had several. It always just kind of works out that you have whatever mentor you have at whatever point you are in your journey for a reason. And it's going to look different as you progress. Mm-hmm. So the relationship I have when I'm talking about dogs with my current mentor, it doesn't look anything like the first time.
Right.
And I just had a wonderful conversation with him the other day, and we get frustrated with each other. It's very mutual. And there's very little instruction in a true mentorship. He's not telling me specifically, listen, Cady, you have to do this with the dog and then do that. No, he actually refuses to do that to a point. He won't tell me logistical information. He won't tell me how to do things. It's about making sure I have the foundation knowledge and then allowing me to explore that on my own, smacking me in the back of the head once in a while if I get too far off course. But at this point, it's a mentorship of self-discovery and him just kind of setting the boundaries and giving me that freedom to fuck up, which I do regularly. Mm-hmm. And he's right there to remind me. But we can do that over the phone. We can do that through, like you and I even talking. It's way easier now than it was 20 years ago.
Right. So you want to start dog training. You have some experience with dogs, and you have to, I guess, introduce yourself to some sort of structure to start becoming a dog trainer. How does that unpack itself? What are you learning first? Are you learning how to, are you learning about behavior, or are you learning commands and behavior through the context of those more tangible skills?
With dog training, it all depends on how you got started. And I say how because there are so many ways. This is a completely unrestricted business or niche, if you will. Mm-hmm. So you have colleges. I guess you could call it that. I mean, you have these private institutions that people have set up, and they give you a piece of paper that says that you've studied, and they charge you a shit ton of money. So what are you learning in there? It all depends on what that organization's agenda is. I didn't go to any schools. I was trial by fire. I mean, I was out just with this guy. He told me a bunch of stuff. Some of it was like, oh, okay, I've done that before and it doesn't work. But, oh, here's some new stuff I haven't tried yet. Let me absorb that and process that. 5 years goes by. You get on with someone else. So what you're learning in terms of, are you learning behavior, or are you learning actual specific methodology and techniques? It really all depends on how you start your path. Ideally, you'd learn behavior, not dog behavior. Right. And you'd be getting into some Pavlov and some Skinner. That's how anyone, I would suggest, after having done this and screwed up more times than I can count, starting off learning the foundation of learning theory, B.F. Skinner's work, studying his graduate students, Keller and Marie Breland, Bob Bailey. These are people who worked with all different kinds of animals. Once you learn behavior, it's universal, MC. Whether you want to get into horses, whether you want to train dogs, or who knows, or you want to improve your relationship with your significant other, because it's all the same behavior modification.
I've been preaching this for years now. I'm on board with you, brother. Especially
kids. Powerful stuff with kids. Once you learn that first, then from there, you would get into your species-specific education, which would be, all right, I understand behavior, and that learning always continues. Now let's talk about dogs. Let me learn more about this particular species of animal, to apply that and mix it with behavior. And then you can effectively start getting out, interacting with dogs and changing and modifying their behavior.
Right. So you are now becoming, exposed to being a dog trainer. Eventually you transition to actually making money, becoming a professional and doing that. How did that come about? Was it in the beginning, I'm going to, ma'am, I'll teach your dog to not shit on your kitchen floor? Or are you just opening yourself to a business in a general sense? How does that happen?
For me, I said, you know what? Most people, after about 10 years of messing around with dogs, I said, people have no idea what they're doing. Through no fault of their own. Ignorance is not a bad word. Willful ignorance is something different. But when you don't know, you just don't know something. So I said, I know something, and I'm pretty good at it. I deserve to get paid. That's how it started one night sitting on my couch. I'm like, I need to start making money on this because I've spent thousands of dollars, books, VHS tapes, because that's what it was back then.
Right.
And throwing money around trying to educate myself. Now I need to get this back. And it started with a sheet of like construction paper, and I'm on an old printer and making business cards. And I said, I'm just going to go out and start handing out business cards to people. And that's how I started my business. Just going out, shaking hands. And then at the time when I finally started turning this into a business, I had actually left Florida and came back to Albany for about a year. I didn't know if I was going to stay in Florida. I figured, let me go back. And
what year was this?
This was April of 2003. I went back up to Albany, and I needed customers. Now, here I am. I have no resume. All I've done is just train friends' dogs, people's dogs. I had been in a couple training clubs. So I went in the hood, and I started walking around with flyers. And I got a real education because I had a lot of clients because I was the only guy willing to walk through neighborhoods that I shouldn't have been walking through. Mm-hmm. And I would bring my partner, Taka, my pit bull at the time, who was, that was my brother, man. That was my best friend. Mm-hmm. And he was also probably assisted me in getting out of some of the situations I was in those neighborhoods because I didn't belong. But I got a lot of business, a lot. And it was the kind of business that taught me about business. Because, you got to learn a lot of this by experience. Right. And you go in and you got to make the mistakes and you got to fall. And I fell a lot. Yep. But it also gave me a lot of exposure to a really wide range of dogs with behavioral problems, different environments that they had come up in. And it was all an education. As much as I was starting to run a business, it was an education. The promise that I made to myself back then, and it was to always have it be part-time. One thing I did learn from a lot of mentors was don't go full-time with it until you're ready. And I've seen a lot of guys over the years who loved dogs. And because of their business or their ineptitude at running a business, that is a factor, they hate dogs now. They want nothing to do with dogs. And I got into this because I think the dog is one of the coolest freaking animals there is. Mm-hmm. And I never want to lose that. MC, I still see a dog walk down the sidewalk. And I just look at him, I'm like, man, that's a cool dog. Look at those colors on him. Like, I appreciate the same things I appreciated when I was 15. And I don't want to lose that. So I've really paced myself with this while I've seen others kind of like jump in too hard, too fast, and then fall flat in their face and then they end up having cats. And right. That'll never happen. No.
Right. Okay. So you're now a trainer. We're, about 2003, thereabouts, and you start your business. What are you realizing the biggest need for dog owners is at the time? And maybe this changes over time. Maybe as you develop, it becomes different as you start getting more experience. But what were you actually fixing? Cady, I need you to come help me work with my dog. What are you showing up and doing the majority of times during those earlier years?
Educating humans. I learned real quick that it's never the dog, ever. The dogs don't need fixing. They're simply reacting and responding.
What are the? Because I agree with you. In my definitely lesser experience than you have, that is my experience completely. But what are they calling you to have fixed?
Oh, okay. What's the catalyst?
They're not saying, "Listen, I need education. Come and educate me because I'm fucking this up." What are they like? What are they asking you to fix?
Number one, dog on dog aggression. I mean, it was bad then. It's even worse now. It's a problem that's getting worse, and it has, again, nothing to do with the dogs. It has to do with our society and our culture, and the way people interact with dogs. So there's been a steady increase. It was a lot back then. It's even more now of people that need help with their dog behaving aggressively or demonstrating aggressive behaviors towards other dogs. Number one. Number two is just the blanket statement, my dog is stubborn and won't listen to me.
Right.
And that's an umbrella.
Right.
And some people he won't listen to anything, or he listens to this sometimes when I'm doing this and the moon is in Aquarius and then he'll listen to me. Right. And then there's other people who it's just, he's destroying my house. Destruction would probably be the third. They're all related to each other. But dog on dog aggression, number one, dog not listening, not obeying commands all the time. And then destruction, he keeps tearing this up or he keeps tearing that up. How do I get him from taking food off the counter, stuff like that? Those are the top three. And they are so statistically, they happen way more than the other ones. The other ones are insignificant. Those are the three big ones.
Right.
Then and now.
And then and now, you said?
Yeah.
Right. So
it hasn't changed. Right.
So let's now get into, what you had said earlier about fixing people. And it's always a people problem. It's never a dog problem. I'll give you an anecdotal preface. I'll preface this by saying my dog, I have a Belgian Malinois, and I have for a little over 5 years now. He's about 7. And he's trained. We got him trained. He was protection trained, obedience trained, whatever the fuck that means generally. More specifically, he bites people. I tell him to bite. He stays out of my fucking way. He knows where the boss is. He shits outside. Like, he is a very cooperative, productive member of the home. When my wife is with him, and I'm sure you noticed this, I have noticed this over the years, because even I understand it. When my wife is with him, it is a negotiation. When I am home, it is like I have a remote control. All I have to do is give him a look, and he knows when to go to his crate, when to come to me, when to shut up, when to do whatever I want him to do. It's to the point now where he and I are so in sync that the majority of my commands are nonverbal. It's just hand gestures and a look, or a combination of the two. Now, one of the things I'm always telling my wife is that it's not that he's not listening to you. It's that you are in a negotiation with him. And that negotiation isn't one that you're always winning. How would you explain the difference between people who have, because I've always had the ability, and this is with me with animals, with dogs specifically, with kids, and even with people to some extent, I know how to control and influence behavior, and it's never been an issue for me. My wife, on the other hand, she's going to be watching this, she's going to get pissed, but it's the same thing with my sons. My sons are stubborn, very opinionated young men, as I've designed them to be, but they will run all over you if you're backing up while you're talking to them, and that's how they've been trained and raised. So she also needs to put her foot down when that is necessary. But with the dog, there is a parallel. So it is an example of maybe it's not them, sweetie. Maybe it's you.
That's the common denominator.
Right. So how would you explain how it is some people seem to get that right off the bat or have an inherent ability, whereas other people need to sort of fix it? And what is it that they're fixing exactly?
That's an excellent question. And one I feel very comfortable talking about because it has a lot of personal significance to me, because I'm not you. The way you describe yourself, that kind of ability that is it's almost impossible to describe. Like, just things just tend to happen a certain way. Don't know. Dogs just behave differently around me. Kids, other men. I'm the opposite of you. So I don't have that. And that familiarity with that, why do they respond differently with me than if you and I were standing next to each other? So if you and I were in a room together, hanging out, and you brought in some dogs, it would be fascinating to see how differently they treat us.
Right.
They will, without us saying a word, they will show you deference. Whereas me, they might be a little bit more pushy. Mm-hmm. So this comes back to your question. Well, why? Why is that happening? There is a significant genetic component to that I have never seen discussed publicly. I've never seen it on a website. I have no data to support this other than my own anecdotal experience. No one wants to talk about it, but it's there. And the reason why we know it's there is because it's there with all animals. You watch a litter of puppies, they're going to behave differently. There's going to be one who's got a bigger set of balls than the others. Mm-hmm. And that's just the way those chromosomes lined up for him. Horses, any other social animal that we can think of that people have common, knowledge or experience with, we notice it there. With humans, our society and our culture has made us not want to see that because, we're all equal, of course. Equality. We're all cut out. We're all cookie cutter, and we're identical. And people are actually believing that horse shit. The reality is we're not equal. We're genetically different. And there are some people who just have more of a presence about them. Even if they don't know anything about behavior specifics and can't have a conversation on operant conditioning or break it down, but they can walk into a room. That dog who's a dick for everyone else might walk up. Why is it he takes a sniff and then either moves away or starts changing his posture? Why? Because he smelled something different about that person. Testosterone is a hormone. Mm-hmm. Hormones have chemical signatures. So doesn't cortisol, adrenaline. They stink. Mm-hmm. And dogs have, we can barely grasp how deep and powerful their sense of smell is. So they know who you are by smelling you. They know how confident you are by your odor. They can sense your anxiety because all of these things have chemical signatures. And that comes from a heavy dose of nature. How are you bred? When you talk about warriors, lots of times a big part of being a warrior is breeding. Warriors come from warriors. Now you factor in the nurture on top of that, and you have a real powerful impact. Well, on the flip side, the opposite of warrior genetics and warrior nurturing an environment, you have nervousness, you have fear, you have anxiety, you have uncertainty. As you get older, that magnifies. So there are going to be people who are not naturally good with that. We use the word assertive when we're talking about interpersonal relationships. A person who has difficulty with that is going to have difficulty with dogs. The dogs are going to understand that. They're going to smell it right off the bat. Right. I don't know if I got off.
No. That's it. That's it. So one of the more interesting things that I've noticed over the years dealing with Zuko, my Malinois, is how my son, Hayden, my oldest son, who I guess was around 6 or 7 when we first got him, is now, he just turned 11 recently. Zuko is now listening to him. Mm-hmm. So he could give Zuko commands where in the beginning, Zuko didn't give a fuck what he was talking about. He was just some little shit that, was in the house along with him. And it was interesting watching that conversion. And one of the things that I've always told him is, and I got this is a segue into my Cesar Millan topic. I've always told him, you have to be calm but assertive. Stand up straight, look at him like he's supposed to listen to you. Don't ask him anything. Tell him what to do. Mm-hmm. Don't ever ask a dog. tell the dog what to do. If you're not telling him what to do, you shouldn't be talking to him in the first place, right? Because you're not going to have a conversation with him. So it's a phrase, the whole calm and assertive, and the opposite, calm and submissive. It's a phrase that I got from, then it was the show The Dog Whisperer. He's got a new show now. I remember my trainer, Jesse, when I got Zuko, had mixed feelings about Cesar Millan. And I know these sort of industry type, things and drama. I know that that's a component of it. But as far as what is actually being put out, out on his show, and he's got a new one now, because so much of it I've seen overlap with in my dealings with my dog, with the kids in my school, with my own children. Where do you see a lot of that information? What are some of the things that you might think is misrepresented? But are you familiar with, the Dog Whisperer and all that stuff? Because it has to add to the whole dog training industry, right? The fact that there's at one point a popular TV show about it.
Yes, I am familiar. I haven't seen his new show. I don't watch much television anymore, but I did watch many episodes of the original seasons of The Dog Whisperer. Mm-hmm. I currently have some mixed feelings. However, the majority of them are positive towards him and what he did. His show changed dog ownership in the United States, single-handedly.
Right.
Now, there are some people out there right now very outspoken saying that he took dog training back 50 years. They're full of shit. The majority of commentary on Cesar Millan in particular is highly emotional, subjective feelings.
Haters gonna hate, yo.
Yep.
The guy's making money. That's going to piss people off that are broke.
Listen, he was the first one of us to get on Oprah. We've all wanted to be on Oprah because once you go on Oprah, I mean, you're
sky's the limit.
Yep. So in the community, in the training community, I found very early on that the majority of people who were against him, I found that they never really communicated in an objective, logical way what their objection was. To me, they were just pissed off because he made it big first. And the reality is he really wasn't a dog trainer. Like when it comes to like teaching dogs specific behaviors and obedience, and that's not him at all. He doesn't do any of that. What he did do that we needed was start talking to people about relationships and about what dogs need in that relationship, not what you want to give them.
Right.
And that's where you get in. I mean, we could go off on that whole age-old debate on, is altruism even possible? Is it even real? Because lots of times you're doing charity to make yourself feel good, which is
self-serving. That's right.
That's not altruism. Right. So people do these things for their dogs. Most of the things they do are wrong, and they're doing them because it makes them feel good.
Right. But it's dysfunctional.
He said love and cuddles are at the bottom of the list. We need, guidance, rules, boundaries, exercise, leadership. That's all way before cuddles. So it was good that he put that out there. My only issue with Cesar was the alpha role. And for those who don't know, the alpha role is one of the most, it's like showing steak to a vegan. Just say the word alpha roll, and some people might quiver in a puddle of emotion. It's the act of taking your dog and manually putting it on its back,
right,
so that it knows I'm your boss.
Right.
That one, you don't need to show that to the general public because they're going to get bitten,
right,
or mauled. A lot of dogs I'm used to working with, you get into Malinois and some really high-end Dutch Shepherds. Good luck with that. Let me know how that works out for you.
Right.
And the reality is you don't need to do that to your dog to be a leader. And they say, well, wolves do it. Well, most of the time what's happening is the submissive dog or wolf is actually offering
Right.
It's a submissive offering.
Right.
It's not a dominant manipulation.
Right.
So if we really start getting into the science behind it, it's not even that accurate. Why did he do that? I have a hunch. He was a very well-earning media person. I mean, that shit's controlled by the networks.
Right.
They know how to make money.
Mm-hmm.
His show did good. You notice how he didn't even start really getting into that hands-on stuff. Why did that stuff start showing up later in later seasons?
Right.
Ratings.
Yeah, people like seeing it.
Yeah, and I have to wonder how much of him doing that was him selling out to the producers, because he wasn't talking about like grabbing dogs and flipping them on their backs in his first episodes. He was talking about how to achieve a leadership role without having to do that, because it's possible.
Right. So one of the things that I was always I'd always gotten conflicted feelings about, or not conflicted feelings, but conflicted information about, and my feelings have swayed back and forth, admittedly, is the whole idea of a dog being put into a dog run as a means of fulfilling a sort of tribal tendency that they have. What are your feelings on dog runs, or, you know, what Cesar Millan has is his dog psychology center, which it's hard for me to say with a straight face, which is basically a big fucking thing with just dogs. But what are your thoughts on dog runs and dog parks and, oh, my dog needs friends, you know, like that whole shit? I'm
very outspoken about dog parks. Anyone who heads over to my blog, you just just go in the search bar and type in the word dog park. And I wrote an article back in 2012 that said, just say no, ... to dog parks. My first venturing into the world of clickbait. That article got a lot of traffic because I start out by saying, yeah, I'm about to tell you that your favorite place to take your dog is the worst place to take your dog.
That's what I thought.
Dog parks are horrible places where it's about risk versus reward. But the minute you enter into a dog park, and I'm being very specific about that. We're talking about dog parks right now, not dog daycares or things like the psychology center. You know, that's different. A dog park is a public place where you walk in with a bunch of other people who have brought their dogs, and you're about to unclip them and let them run. And the reason why a lot of people do that is because they have been told, or they have seen on the internet over and over again, to socialize their dog. Well, that's not socialization.
Right.
And the reason why they're being told to socialize their dog is either to A, prevent problems, or somehow magically solve problems that already exist. So if you have a dog who already has an attitude problem, hey, let's talk about things people know. You got a kid who's a little bit of a jerk, a little bit of a bully, say, maybe, or he talks bad, who knows, or he's wimpy, one or the other. Are you just going to take him and send him someplace with a bunch of other kids you don't know and close your eyes and just like, that's going to fix it? No, his behaviors that are unwanted are either going to become stronger, or they're going to become worse. Or if it's a fearful child and you put him in with a bunch of, tough kids, they're going to smell his weakness and they're going to make him even more fearful, more scared, validate his insecurity to a higher degree. You got no control. Same thing with a dog park. So you go into a dog park, you unclip that leash, you have no control over what happens next. None. And with dogs, all it takes is for a dog to be scared one time, or to have one bad experience where he's playing with one dog and out of nowhere comes another one and just grabs him and gives him a shake. That dog is going to have issues for life, or you're going to be spending thousands of dollars getting me to try to help you fix it. All because you thought he needed friends. Listen, folks, it's called man's best friend for a reason. And that's because all that dog needs in life is you.
Right.
If you're doing your job.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't need to have other friends.
A parallel to that is, when I first wrote a book on homeschooling, right? Finding a way to homeschool, findingawaytohomeschool.com. But when I wrote the book, one of the big topics that homeschooling families deal with from outsiders who don't have a practical experience or hands-on experience with homeschooling is the whole socialization thing. And the way I would explain it to them, and maybe it's not a direct complete parallel to dog training, but with kids, I would tell them there's a difference between socialization and the development of social skills. And social skills is a functional accumulation of ability and skills that allow them to operate productively in the lives they're going to lead. Socialization seems to be some sort of conflation. They're confusing just being around other identities is somehow going to do what I had mentioned previously, which that's not the case at all. I would always ask, who's going to teach my 5-year-old how to act maturely, or how to learn how to eventually become an adult? Other 5-year-olds? So you have this very, very elementary understanding of how this whole socialization / social skill development process even happens naturally,
You're spot on. That actually is a direct analogy, and it is the exact same thing. It's not even parallel. It's on the same road. We from the martial arts world, we know, practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. So you have to have successful experiences, successful repetitions to create further success. So going to a dog park, you have no control over whether or not those interactions are going to be good, bad. So you could be practicing really bad things, and your dog could be practicing and getting really good at being a jerk and becoming more fearful. Then you take him out of that environment, you go for a walk, and he's at the end of the leash frothing at the mouth. People would be much better served. While we're on the topic of socialization, before we get off on another tangent, what's way more important than expecting an unrealistic goal that your dog is going to like every other dog it meets. Instead, all the energy and the effort should be put into teaching your dog to focus on one thing only. You. In any environment, I am God. I am the coolest thing there is. I am the most popular guy in the lunchroom. I am the key to all things of joy, wonder, and pleasure in any dog I am working with. And that should be for anyone. That's not just me because I'm a dog trainer and I got some high-end competition dogs. No, that's what anybody in a home with a dog needs to strive for. Teaching their dog to focus on them. Because if the dog's out in public and it's focusing on them and not worried about everything else, that's a pretty successful way to navigate an unpredictable environment like real life. Those are the coping strategies, the coping skills, if you will, that we want to give the dog that actually builds their confidence. Not sitting there and making them allow another dog come up and sniff them when they're already scared. Like, that's just going to make it worse. It doesn't even make sense.
Right. So another thing that you've commented on through your social media that really, really, resonates with a lot of the struggles that I have in the more people-oriented work that I do, because I started personal coaching a while ago, and it really just became a sort of natural transition for me from training martial arts to using martial arts to teach other universals that help in martial arts, but also applied in other areas of their lives, to now just finding some sort of physical language with which to teach them those other things. But beside all of that, the process and what you comment on fairly often is operant conditioning, and how so many people just completely confuse what operant conditioning is, and they pretty much edit it to their own liking. They reverse engineer a cool term that they could use to support what it is that they wanted to do anyway. And what experience do you have with that?
Almost every single client I start on the first day.
Right.
Excuse me. And that's if they even know what the term operant conditioning is. And as you accurately said, it's something I comment on often. A big issue in the find in the dog training community is the professionals are scared or are resistant to communicating with their clients and the public words like operant conditioning. And I have been criticized heavily for using the terminology associated with that with the everyday layperson. My feeling is this. If I'm a teacher, which is what I consider myself when I'm working with someone, I'm a teacher, I'm a coach. I need to help you. I need to instruct you, not your dog. Just because it might be challenging for me to cover that material doesn't mean I don't cover it.
Right.
That's weak. That's a cop-out. And I will even say I almost started doing it without knowing I was doing it. I recall asking my current mentor, I said, I need an adjective. I need a word to describe something in behavioral terms for a client. And the word was, I was looking for a substitute word for aversive. And an aversive, something unpleasant in the environment, something you don't like. And his exact words were, Cady, I want to punch you in the head right now. And I'm like, what? Like this time I really thought I had a good question and I didn't deserve to get punished. This wasn't a stupid question. This was a good one. I said to him, I said, you don't understand. I'm dealing with people who don't necessarily understand these words. So I need to come up with other words. He's like, well, if you're a good teacher, you would figure out how to use the correct words and get them to understand it.
Right.
And we're on the phone and there was like a 10-second pause. He goes, what, do you disagree? I said, no, I'm just contemplating how utterly correct you are and how wrong I was.
Right.
And that was a real eye opener because I was aware prior to that learning opportunity that I need to teach people operant conditioning. I need to teach them properly. But even within that awareness, I was finding shortcuts or looking for shortcuts instead of really sticking to, I am the teacher here. I'm good at what I fucking do. I need to get these words in everyone's head and teach them how to use it. And it's become a little soapbox of mine where, no, I'm going to take, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and I'm going to teach them what operant conditioning is, and I'm going to teach them how to use it with their dog. Even if they didn't want to learn it, it's what they need to know. And I'm not scared if they feel overwhelmed at first because it's my job to teach them.
Right. So my easy explanation for what operant conditioning is, it's you could either reinforce behavior or you could disincentivize behavior. Either add it or make it more common or take it away, disincentivize, lessen it, the behavior. And you could do it by either adding something or removing something. So those two results done those two different ways, each one of them. Where in dog training do you find that people are maybe not, because I can't keep people on the hook for understanding what operant conditioning is as far as the academic, concept. But in application, where do they go wrong? They think that they're doing something right. An example is, well, dog shits on the floor. It's easy. You grab the dog, you put his nose in it. You go, you're a fucking idiot. Don't do that again. And then the dog will understand. Like, don't do that. As an example. But what do you see in operant conditioning training terms that people get wrong, maybe even some trainers get wrong, with that lack of understanding of how that sort of paradigm of operant conditioning works?
First off, people miss the boat because they don't understand the power of what reinforcement actually means. And you did an okay job describing operant conditioning, getting us started. You can take all behaviors that we would want or that we see, and we put them in two categories: stuff we want to see more of, stuff we want to see less of. Mm-hmm. Where a lot of people go wrong is they don't realize that the stuff they want to see less of is happening because they actually reinforced it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
They don't realize that they did. So in not understanding that these consequences even exist, which is why I will teach everyone who comes to me what operant conditioning is, because they need to understand it. And not knowing the power of reinforcement and not understanding how reinforcement works, they've actually created and allowed and encouraged almost every unwanted behavior. So that's one part to answer your question.
And let me just interject there for a sec.
Absolutely.
A quote because that is spot on, and it's something that transcends into training martial arts, raising kids. The phrase that I use is every bad rep makes you better at being bad. And it's reinforcing that unwanted behavior, which is exactly what you were talking about. But I just fucking cut you off. Go
no,
ahead.
that's important to be aware of. Then people don't understand the other side when we talk about punishment. And this is where now trainers are at war with each other. And you'll find it's trainers that are at war, not behaviorists. And there's kind of like a curve in your training career. You start out with dogs, and you get into training really heavy, and you're arguing with other trainers about stuff. And then you realize it has nothing to do with, it's not training, it's about behavior. And then you jump onto a whole new level, and you don't even want to talk to people that call themselves trainers anymore because they don't get it. And you're just going to get angry talking to them and get frustrated. Punishment is so misunderstood.
Okay.
So incredibly misunderstood. And people get confused. Even I hear trainers trying to use the words, and they're using them all wrong. You mentioned very accurately adding things and subtracting things, taking things away. That's all operant conditioning is, that we all learn as a result of consequences. There's something happened that makes us want to do that behavior again, or something happened that makes us not want to do it again. And there's two ways that can happen. Punishment, there's two types of punishment. Positive punishment, which boggles people's minds.
Right.
Positive punishment? How can punishment be positive?
Spank them. Yep.
Get rid of, I tell people, I got a big whiteboard. It's one of them sitting behind me. I bring with me, and I draw a smiley face and a frowny face, and I draw a line through it. When we think about positive and negative, we're not thinking about these emojis.
Right.
And then I draw an addition sign and a subtraction sign. I said, this is what we want to think of.
Right.
So positive punishment, the addition of some type of consequence that the dog isn't going to like,
right,
as a consequence for that action, hoping that it decreases in frequency.
Right.
And people get real confused on that because it's similar to negative reinforcement, a behavior we want to see again. We still use something unpleasant. We just take that unpleasant thing away when the dog does what we want it to do, and then it says, oh, I'm going to do that quicker next time.
Right.
The problem with punishment, and there is a problem with it, there are challenges with it, is a lot of people that still use it way too much. And with punishment, there are consequences for your own failure in applying it properly. It's very hard to punish properly. Very hard. Very difficult.
What are the variables that one wants to master to not do it ineffectively or incorrectly?
Well, first, there's mechanics. There's just physical mechanics. Depending on how you're issuing the punishment, and a punisher is any type of, it's something that particular dog, because dogs are different, is going to find unpleasant. So you have to have the mechanics to be able to apply that quickly. If you're using a collar, there's various types of tools out there. So whatever tool you're using, you have to have the mechanics to use it properly, which takes practice. And if I do have a client who's ready to begin learning how to use positive punishment or a correction, as most probably, everyone has heard of it used before, we got to get down some physical muscle memory and how to do it properly. Next, you need to have incredible timing.
Right.
Like the timing is where even I mess up sometimes, which is why I don't use a lot of punishment. Because in most cases, it's simply not necessary. And the problem with punishment, and we're going to use the example of rubbing the dog's nose, and, is something everyone's heard of it. Well, if you don't catch the dog in the act, number one, first off, the dog has no idea what it is. So let's say you come in 10 minutes later, you see a pile of shit on the floor, you grab Fido's scruff of the neck, and you're like, oh, why'd you do this? And in your mind, you're thinking, yeah, this dog is never going to do this again. In the dog's mind, he's thinking, you crazy bastard, why are you doing this? I have no idea what's happening.
Right.
They don't know, which creates big problems in your relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you catch him in the act. Oh, cool. We've eliminated that issue because we caught him in the act. I mean, he's mid-squat and I'm grabbing him and turning him around. Well, what are you punishing him for? How do you know that the dog knows that the reason he's getting punished is for going under this roof, not on the carpet or on the tile or in front of the couch or in the living room? How do you know what association he's making? He might think he's getting punished for taking a shit on the carpet. So next time he's going to go shit on the tile. So when you get into punishment, you have to really, really know the dog, and you have to understand behavior and timing to even have a chance of communicating the message you want the dog to get in that situation. And that's where the average person is going to struggle significantly, and why they absolutely need help from an experienced professional when you start getting into punishment. And honestly, MC, the reality is there are very few things in dog training that actually would require punishment. And I don't say that as someone who's like, you know, that's not an emotional position I have.
Right.
I started out yanking crank 20 years ago. Right. You put a collar on and you just go. And, you know, I told you how that worked out. I gave the dog away. It was a mess. So for years, I was very rough and heavily punishment based. And then through instruction of people I trust, my eyes were opened and I realized, holy shit, like I hardly ever need to punish if I just put the time and work in. The Malinois that's on my social media that, you know, I'm sure you've seen, I don't have her anymore. She's on with another trainer. But I had her for a year working on her down under distractions before she ever received a correction. A year of training 3 times a day. I didn't use any punishment. Didn't have to, because and that's where I'm not even going to go down that road how I did that. But the reality is, I mean, a whole year, and I can get her to have birds running around her, and she loved birds without ever having to correct her. Now, does that mean I'm against using corrections and punishment? No, and she did reach a time in her training where she was finally ready. But until the dog knows what is expected of it.
That's the key. Yep.
And
let me give you a parallel now, because when I, you know, in my academies, I have something called the instructor certification course. And it's a course that I wrote on how to take students and train them to sort of build the blocks to become a good and effective instructor. And one of the things that I teach them is when a student comes early on, and the analogy that I use or the metaphor is, you know, in the beginning, we need to show them where the road is. We need to teach them how to find the road representing the way of training, the accumulation of techniques, the advancement of skills and abilities. We need to get them on the road. Once they understand what the road is, then we could start smacking them back onto the road when they start veering off. But until they know what that is, they're not ready. There is no context for that punishment. So the thing that I have as a student evolves from first-time student who's never done a martial art to maybe a successful competitor or a professional fighter is I cannot put the new guy through the type of training that my professional fighters go through, because my professional fighters are at the point where the identity of what I want them to do is so solid, they understand it so completely that a correction, a hard correction, a punishment, if you will not sabotage their productivity, will not sabotage their ability to do what they have trained so effectively up to that point to do. Whereas in the beginning, if I were to bark at the, no pun intended, the 2-week white belt for doing something wrong, that bark has an identity all of its own. And it is not within the context of them training. They're saying, this guy's yelling at me. He doesn't like me. He doesn't want me here. I suck. I shouldn't be here. Whereas the professional fighter, that may have to be what I do in order to get into his head and still reach and communicate what I want him to change. So I completely not only understand what you're saying, but I see the same process. Like it is hilarious to me because it is completely the same model when dealing with students.
I can't wait till you get some more dogs.
Yeah, well, and this is why, because you know what?
My!
People piss me off on a regular fucking basis, man. My dog has yet to let me down.
Dude, I mean, you'd be like my dream client, because you recognize the parallels. And why do you recognize the parallels? Because you understand behavior,
right.
And you have an open, objective mind, and you ask questions, and you require explanations to help you come to a logical conclusion based on a collection of data and information. It's the same thing, whether it's your students, kids. I mean, it's huge with kids. If a child does not understand why they're being punished, what's the point? What's actually happening? You're ruining the trust, because it isn't the act of having something painful or aversive put on you is not what takes away trust. It's when you don't know why it's being put on you. That's where there's going to be issues. If a child absolutely understands that what they did was wrong and they receive some type of punishment, whether it's positive punishment, something unpleasant happening to them, or it's negative punishment, which is the removal of something desired, take away the Xbox or whatever it will be. If they understand why it happened, that actually increases or strengthens the bond of trust, because they learn to trust that if I step outside, if I get out of my lane, there's going to be a consequence. And that in and of itself creates relaxation.
Right.
That is comforting. Rules can be comforting in the right context.
I agree. And when you look at one of the things Anthony Robbins talks about a lot, not a dog trainer, right? But he talks about the idea of certainty. And it's exactly what you're just describing. Not being able to necessarily control everything in your environment, but to be able to trust and rely on everything in your environment to act and behave the same. That consistency gives you the certainty that allows you to sort of reduce that anxiety. When working with, I do a lot of work with parents, specifically fathers who are trying to develop more productive relationships with their sons. Nobody wants to raise a pussy, right? And I'm the guy that a lot of guys reach out to sort of help deal with that. And one of the things I always tell them, because they manifest their desire to sort of share what masculinity is in a very, punishment-oriented way. And the dynamic that they establish with their kids is one where they wind up just representing punishment to their kid. Whenever they show up, the kid gets yelled at. And they don't understand that association is being drawn because they're not doing the work necessary to, number one, make sure that they are represented or associated as something being positive, productive, enjoyable, to get away from the operant conditioning terms, enjoyable. And then they're not doing the work necessary to show them how to be. I said, you cannot raise a child through showing them what not to be over what to be, and in terms of priority. Show them how to act the right way before you start punishing them for acting the wrong way. Give them something to run toward. Don't be the source of everything they need to run away from. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. That's huge with kids. And it's all about the context of, something you said in that last explanation is something we hear a lot in dog training. And that's, you got to show them what to do, something to run to.
Right.
If it's all punishment, well, first of all, that's not fun. Then let's face it, fun matters.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to smile at some point in your life. I mean, it'd be nice to, as long as you're getting your work done, you're doing what you need to do, and you have your values that you're holding true to. Pleasure isn't a bad thing. I'd like to experience it. So it's just teaching them how to experience that pleasure, what context to experience it in. So I need my dog to know all the things I want it to do that are going to yield something pleasurable to the dog.
Mm-hmm.
and this is huge with puppies. The first year of a dog's life is so much work. So when people talk about, I have a 3-month-old puppy. How long do I have to wait before I get another one? How about a year and a half, 2 years?
Right.
My dog has some issues. I think I'll just get another one to help him out with it. I wrote an article to add or not to add. That is the question. And I break that down. Like, listen, if you're raising a puppy the right way, there's no way you'd fucking want another one at the same time. Like, that's insanity. Because to do it the right way means you're constantly shaping and molding the environment first to allow the puppy to have continual successful opportunities. I have to build that relationship. And the way I build that relationship is setting that puppy up for success continually and then reinforcing it strategically and consistently. So I'm not allowing bad habits to start. I want to create this environment where they have to learn it the right way. And instantly what pops into my mind is debates that I've had on the gi versus no gi.
Right.
I'm a big fan of starting in the gi.
Right.
There's certain lessons that are learned. I mean, Danaher explained it better than I ever could, but it's when students are new in martial arts, the coach is setting up an environment to where they can be successful so they can get that perfect practice, so they can get those successful repetitions in, so they can be rewarded for it. So as you mentioned, great analogy, you got to get them on the road before you can punish them for being off of it.
Right.
That's what I call it puppydom. That first year it's a lot of work. It isn't all about cuddles, and that's what everyone has a problem with. And they do the same thing with their kids. Right. They don't want to start raising their kids till they're 12 years old and they're out of control. And then you got a 12-year-old who's willing to do this to you.
Right.
He feels comfortable with that because he's had 12 years of practice. 0 to 5 is where all the work is. There's so much teaching that goes into a human child in 0 to 5.
That's right.
That makes the rest of it go smoother. That's where you build the foundation of what is your code in your home. And to use even more familiar terminology, every tribe has a code. There's going to be rules within that tribe that have to be taught. When are they taught? In the beginning. Mm-hmm. So that the punishments don't have to be as severe down the road.
And my escalation of mocking, exiling, yes, or punishing, exiling,
yep,
killing.
So that I don't have to kill you.
That's right. And when you have that self-correcting tribal identity, you wind up, it's a group of people who are reminding everybody where to be on the road, and it has a very organic effect. I wanted to touch on something that I'm very interested in. I know that you have some stuff to say about it too, but when I decided to get my dog, I was living in the Bronx. I was traveling a lot for business, and I have a wife. I had at the time, I think, I had 3. I think I had Kaiden, my third son. But I had a whole boatload of kids, and I had my wife there. And getting firearms permits in New York City was next to impossible. And getting it from my wife, the immigrant, was even harder. So I felt, when I'm on a trip, rather than try and square my wife away with a shotgun, should there be an issue, let's get a dog. So I started doing my research. That's what really opened my eyes to the world of dog training. When trying to find the right dog, I wound up, extremely, extremely satisfied with the dog I wound up getting. But I saw that in the world of protection training and what protection dogs are, there's this huge spectrum of opinions. And one of the things that endeared me to the trainer, Jesse, that I got Zuko from eventually, is he said, listen, I don't train Schutzhund dogs. I don't train competition. These dogs, I train dogs for practical scenarios. And me being the jiu-jitsu MMA street fighting guy, I was like, yeah, right on. I don't want some fucking point karate dog. I want some Valley Tudo dog, mm-hmm. And that is how I was first introduced to it. What is your take on that that sort of spectrum of protection training, or what when it comes to protection training?
It absolutely is a spectrum. There's a whole world out there. And I first started really getting into formal education on it back in probably early 2001, 2002. I had been doing some stuff with dogs prior to that, completely winging it and learning some lessons that way. I didn't finally get into a suit until I lived in Jacksonville, Florida. And again, just through sheer luck, meet up with some guys, Jay Murphy, Scott Wiggum in Jacksonville. I have lifelong gratitude to them for putting me in a suit finally and getting bit by a bunch of Malinois. It's very similar to martial arts and human combat in that we have a spectrum there too. So you said something that I want to touch on. You said, I don't want a karate point dog. Right now, the majority of people, the only way you can come into contact with this information is you go on YouTube and you type in dog attack or, protection training. And at that point, you will see so much stuff. You'll see people with the sleeves on, catching dogs on there. You'll see people with sleeves on their legs. You'll see people in entire bodysuits. And through that range is where, when we think about the 14-year-old hitting some focus pads in a boxing gym. Mm-hmm. We've all seen that person who is, crisp. They can look great, especially they get in those routines and they look like monsters. Like, man, I never want to fight that guy. Look at that. And then you see him get in the ring in an arena out of town and someone punches him square in the nose and he folds.
Right.
He looked really good on those pads though. Oof, he was a monster. When we see young dogs, whenever I see someone with a young dog, when I say young, I mean under 10 months of age, doing bite work, that is no indication to me of what they're going to do in the future. What it tells me is, okay, they got the physical skills, and that's what you see with young dogs. It's no different than children. We're not sending 8-year-olds out into the alleyway to fend for themselves with a broken shard of glass. No, we teach them the techniques and the mechanics. This is how you do this. You build that foundation. Now, when it gets down to what will the dog actually do, a lot of people get very confused and they see a dog barking at a person holding a sleeve and they're like, oh, that dog's a killer. Yeah, if a sleeve ever comes into your home and tries to kidnap your wife.
Right.
Last time I checked, no sleeves are getting up and going in and hurting people, nor are bite suits or anything like that.
Right.
It's no different than a tug toy. It's a game to the dog. It's not until you get a dog who's 3 or 4 years of age or fully sexually matured, has a good foundation under it of training, where you can even consider starting to then test where that dog is mentally in terms of violence. Because there's a difference between violence and training. There is a difference between being prepared for the hormonal reaction to, and I am intentionally using the word again, violence. Mm-hmm. Because that word has to be said multiple times for people to really start to say, why does he keep saying violence? Because violence is different than what most everyone's used to. They've either never seen it, they've never experienced it, and it's the same thing with the dogs. So if the dog has just been, and I'm not talking about taking a padded stick and do and doing all these choreographed routines with the animals. No. Because even those dogs that have been on suits their whole lives, you put them with a strange decoy or a person they've never met before in a different environment, and maybe they can't see the suit. Because you cover it, or it's a really thin suit that hurts a lot to wear because you feel everything. Mm-hmm. But the dog you don't look like the big marshmallow man walking around. Mm-hmm. And then you simply jump out from behind a building. Dog doesn't see it coming.
Right.
Then you find out what dog has been trained properly through the process, what dog has just been doing a dance and hitting some focus mitts, because that's the real world. Now, what the dog does, a lot of it's genetics. There are certain dogs that just are not capable of doing certain things. Bill Gates will never be the lightweight champion of the world in UFC. He just won't. He doesn't have it. That's not his. That wasn't in his chromosomes. His DNA. The same thing with dogs. So when someone comes to me and says, I have a dog already, and I want him to protect me. I mean, the first thing I do if they can't see me is I get ready for the conversation I'm about to have. That's going to be very frustrating. If they already have a dog, it's, well, what do you need a dog to do?
Right.
Because it really should be a layer. And I know you're very familiar, and I'd love to learn even more from you on really the protocols of self-defense. There is a system from identifying and then I can't remember the acronym. I want to get more familiar with it. Orienting and then acting. It's the same thing with dogs. So you have to know, is my dog an alert? It's going to let me know there's a threat. Is it an alert and it'll hang out a little bit to be a deterrent enough for me to get to my firearm or get to safety or get my loved ones to safety? Is it going to engage, but probably not for long? There's a lot of dogs that'll bite, but there's a difference between biting and fighting.
Right.
There's a difference between punching a guy when he's not looking and hitting him back after he's hit you 4 times and then biting him and get like, I am here to fight you till the end. Right. That's very different. And most people don't need that dog, MC. They don't need that dog that'll stay till the end. They probably couldn't handle that dog if they had him. Right. And those dogs are not readily accessible to the public. They're not readily accessible as personal protection dogs because they're just too much. That's what the special forces are using. No one even really knows what that dog looks like because they haven't seen it because it's not on YouTube. It really isn't, because you cannot show on YouTube that process.
So now, I know one of the things that when I got Zuko, that I was shown by the trainer, Jess, that I got him from, he would show me videos and he would explain, that process, everything that, you explained. And he would show me, and I always found it interesting, videos of him working with dogs and basically breaking them, in intimidation. So these dogs that were brought to him that were these great dogs, and he had like a thing, I don't want to get into too much of his shit, but he had this thing with a European trainer that was selling people shit dogs. And so he took this one dog that was bought from his trainer, and he basically filmed the video of him getting this dog to fucking run scared when given a command. And this dog was purchased for like, 15 grand, 20 grand or something. Yep. And he's like, this is bullshit. But the thing is, the dog's big, scary, likes to bite on a suit. But as soon as somebody understands the behavior of it, like he recognizes immediately this dog is not about that life, and a parallel for me that I know of is with people. I know when people are talking a good game, and I can look them up and down and say, this guy is not ready to do what it takes, no matter what's coming out of their mouth, and I always tell people, if you go to any area, any type of institution or environment where men congregate, tribally, it's not always the biggest, strongest guy that's running shit. It's the guy that is just programmed to be that guy. And this is what people don't understand. And again, another parallel with the animal behavior, specifically dogs, is there are some dogs that are programmed to be that dog. So I've seen it, and I've seen the opposite. I've seen big, scary dogs that run like little bitches as soon as the water gets deep,
Mm-hmm. Well, it's very similar. When we talk, you mentioned, despite what's coming out of the guy's mouth, he's not ready for it. Well, the fact that there's a bunch of things coming out of his mouth, there's a reason for that. So when I'm explaining about aggressive behavior to people who want to talk about how badass this dog is, just look at him. Just look at him. He's frothing at the mouth. He looks all big and scary. And I'm like, yeah, he's basically telling me he's a punk. Well, what do you mean? Look at all those teeth. I'm like, well, if you're at the bar and some guy's in your face telling you what he's going to do to you, if you persist or you don't back down, I'm going to rip your head off. I'm going to kick your ass. I'm going to.
It's a sales pitch, I call it. It's
Exactly.
a sales pitch. He's selling you something.
They don't want to fight. And they're hoping all of this is going to make you go away. Right. And with dogs, we call it distance decreasing signals. So dogs have an assortment of behaviors programmed into them. And all they do through life is try these different behaviors in different situations to see what the consequence is. So they learn real quick when they show their teeth, when they and then the threat goes away. Oh, because what they really want, those dogs, what they really want is for the person to go away. Right. Now, you get around some real rough dogs, man, if you didn't know what you're looking at, you could get in trouble because their tail's wagging and they're not growling. They're not snarling. They might be barking a lot out of excitement, or they might just be silent, looking with very dilated pupils and some clear salivation with a wagging tail. They don't want you to go away.
Right.
They want to engage in that fight. They enjoy that. Those are the scary ones. Right. That's the dog I say, yeah, I'm not messing with him. I mean, I'll let him come hump my leg for a minute or two. Like, we're good. These are old pants. It's okay. The dog who's got all the hair up and the hackles, I mean, you grab a hold of him, he's going to piss and shit himself and be gone. That's why he's doing all of that stuff, is to tell you he doesn't want to fight.
Right. Fascinating stuff. So wrapping up a bit, somebody wants to get a dog trainer. Give them advice. They have a dog that isn't trained. I have a perfect example. Good friend of mine, Tom Kyer, has two massive Borbals.
Yes. Oh, I love those dogs. Yeah.
Oh, they are magnificent. They're like two fucking lions walking around his house.
Beautiful.
And beautiful, big, strong dogs. He needs to get them trained. What should he do?
Very first thing, if he's going to, is to educate himself. And this is what I wish people could do more of before you even try to find a trainer. Even to just do some random searching on dog behavior first. And I know the whole point is, well, I want to hire someone to do that for me. But if I'm going to give advice, I'm going to say try to get a basic understanding of dog behavior, of behavior in general. Because the reality is, it's difficult to make an educated decision on hiring someone to help you with something you have no clue about. Mm. Right. I mean, let's face it. A lot of people have gone into, a martial arts school wanting one thing and getting something completely different than that. And unfortunately, they don't find out until put into a potentially dangerous situation, and they find out all that was for naught. Well, they can say, I researched it. Yeah, but unfortunately, you didn't have the necessary background information to conduct that research and come to an educated decision. So the first thing for anybody watching, if you have an issue and you want to hire a dog trainer, just do a quick little Google search on operant conditioning. Get some basics, read some blogs, read my blog. I have some articles on how to find a trainer to help you.
Okay, there you go.
If you don't want me to do it. And that's the start. Now, from there, go to Google and just look for dog trainers and find multiple ones. And the key is asking them the tough questions that you would ask any professional of anything that you're going to hire. If you're hiring a personal trainer, ask them about their failures. Ask them about their challenges. Ask them those tough questions that you get asked when you go into a job interview. Because that's going to tell you a lot about the person you're about to give your money to. How big is their ego? Anyone who tells you they haven't screwed up or made a mistake either hasn't done whatever it is enough, or they're a liar, or they're a combination of both, and you need to find somebody else at that point. And there's a lot of that shit in the dog training world. A lot of it. that research you can do ahead of time will set you up for at least putting the odds in your favor of making a better decision when selecting someone. And as for references, if they're not willing to give you references, do not work with them. Oh, well, my clients are high profile and don't like their information being given out. Oh, that's awesome. I wish you the continued success with your high profile clients. Have a nice day.
Right.
You need references before and after to find out what that person's success level is in teaching whatever it is you need.
Right. You need to vet them. Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So I think that's very sound advice. Now, not needing a trainer, but going to be me sooner or later. I want to be a trainer.
Mm-hmm.
What advice would you give somebody like me or somebody who's listening to this that has aspirations of becoming a trainer, or maybe is a budding trainer and wants to make sure they're following the right track? What would you tell them to do?
I would tell them to listen to everything else that Master Chim has ever said on knowledge and the acquisition of information. Because what you preach through every outreach you do and through all your social media and all your interpersonal interactions with people, the message that you put out there, it's not just to you in martial arts, it's about life. Folks, if you want to get better at that, you have to first open your mind, be willing to listen to other things, which means you cannot be emotionally attached to any piece of information. Emotion and logical thinking don't work. It will sabotage your thought process. And I get trainers who I regularly am online trying to engage in debates, trying to engage in discussions with people, simply because it only strengthens my own ability to express myself properly by getting into these discussions with others. And lots of times the discussions don't bear any fruit, because very quickly I understand this person who however many years they've been doing it, they're emotionally attached to their position. And that's very obvious when they cannot adequately defend it with logic and objective information. So if someone wants to get into training, you have to already realize you're going to hopefully meet a wide assortment of other professionals to guide you along the way. They are going to say conflicting things. Mm-hmm. They are going to, it's like politics. I mean, there's going to be a lot of back and forth. Right. And a lot of times it's one group just saying things simply to try to prove the other one wrong.
Right.
But in the middle is where reality is. And the solution is in here. And it might have a little bit to do with this, and it might have a little bit to do with that. So you can't be emotionally attached because you won't be able to accept it from all the potential sources you could acquire it from.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great answer. To add, I think one of the very common hurdles for a lot of people is they think that being right is a commentary on beating somebody else, winning some sort of a competition. They don't compare the idea of, or the identity of being right with the truth, and with the universe and with the things that are, set in stone around us that are there to help us gain wisdom and grow as individuals. Mm-hmm. Stop trying to be, I call it the slave's victory. The person who measures success solely through beating other people in some sort of a competitive contest. Truth is much bigger than that. And anything that means anything is connected to those higher truths and that older, more universal wisdom. Before I get to Swami at the end of this talk, I just want to say, Cady, I appreciate this. I know you're a busy guy. You've shared a lot of power and insights, and I don't take that for granted. So much gratitude to you, my friend. Well, it is returned. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I mean, there's a lot of information here that goes far beyond dogs. And to all of your viewers, this is stuff that applies to every other avenue of their life that they are also seeking to improve, even by knowing who you are and following the Warrior Project. All right. I appreciate it. Tell people how they can find out more about you, read all those articles that you're referring to.
Oh, absolutely. Very simple. It's a one-stop shop. My website, kdmatthews.com. From there, I have my blog. I have information on training services. I do a lot of online coaching now, where I get this little webcam here and I use the very same thing we're talking on. And I have clients in Ireland now that I'll be showing some more footage of what they're doing over there. So I offer that coaching anywhere in the world with an internet connection. That information is all on my website, my Instagram at KD Mathews, Facebook. It's all the same.
Amazing. All right, brother. Well, thanks again, and I will talk to you soon.
Thank you.